Hi, everybody. Jennifer from Gals, Ghosts, and Ladies here. Welcome to our Sunday morning coffee hour. We are live, so excuse me while I adjust my seat. Thank you. How is everybody doing this morning? Let's see. It's Sunday, April 12th already. It's starting to warm up a little bit, but I'm here in New England, and spring is always like a tease, it starts to warm up a little bit, and then, I don't know, last Monday it snowed, so you just never know what you've got coming your way when it's spring in New England. Inevitably, it will warm up. It's just after winter, it just seems like such a long, long time to wait. Anyways, welcome to Gals, Ghosts, and Ladies Sunday morning coffee hour. If you're seeing me on a Sunday morning live, it usually means that I had plans Saturday night. So last night I went to the USS Salem, which I can actually see from across the bay in my front yard, but went to the USS Salem last night on a paranormal investigation with some many good friends, and I met some new people, and we just had the best time ever. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But let's see, I want to say thank you, everybody, for watching on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for watching now. Thank you for watching at a later time, if you're catching it at a later time. And also, I do ask that you definitely head over to YouTube and like and subscribe. It does help my algorithm. Like I said, I had plans last night, so you didn't see me live stream last night. If I don't do it on Saturday, I try to do it on Sunday morning. I try to do it consistently every week. That's how you build an algorithm. That and likes, subscribes, comments, shares. So I really appreciate that from everybody. Thank you very much. Between Facebook and YouTube. To give you an idea of the difference, right? Before I had 1,000 followers on Facebook, which I only just reached a couple weeks ago. But before I had 1,000 followers on Facebook, I could only invite 50 people to the live streams. Now that I have 1,000 followers on Facebook, I can invite up to 1,000 people. So I get a lot more exposure. And that's thanks to all of you for following on Facebook. So I really appreciate that. The other thing, as I said before, it did take me like a hot minute to get to 1,000 followers, because I do keep my followers list clean. At least once a week, I go in and check all the followers and make sure that they're people who should be following and not people who shouldn't. And if they're people, I find somebody making weird comments, I got to bounce them. It's all about safety and security. So as much as I love the followers and it helps me get an algorithm, I'm also trying to keep everybody safe, myself and you guys. So that's how we operate over here at Gals. We're really trying to have some integrity behind our social media. And as I said before, you'll see me use AI for graphics and stuff, but my posts are human, done by me. My live streams are done human by me, and I'm a real person. So again, please like, subscribe, share, all that kind of good stuff. Tell your friends about me. I'm trying to build a brand. We've got some exciting things coming up. As you know, I keep telling you, I keep threatening you. I'm going to the Paranormal XL network. I'm getting there. And then Christy Parrish and I have an exciting new project that we're getting ready. Next week is our inaugural date, our very first date of getting this thing off the ground. We've had a couple meetings about it. We're very excited. And I just have to give a shout out to the awesome Kristen in New Hampshire. You know who you are. You are just an amazing hostess, and we're always very, very grateful for your graciousness in opening up your home to us. Thank you very much. You'll hear more about Kristen as time goes on. Not today, I mean in the future. So sit tight. So let me take a second and bounce over to comments and see who's watching. I see we've got 8 people watching. Good morning, Jeff and Sue and Sybil and Lori and Christine. Christine, you were absolutely missed last night. I'm glad that I could put your ticket to good use when you weren't feeling well, but you were absolutely missed. And Sybil, you were missed as well. So I'm totally bummed. And Will, my brother-in-law, if you tune in, you were missed as well. And Christy, if you tune in, you were missed as well too. I said yesterday, we had the cool kids table. I'm almost 62 years old, and I still get a kick out of that. We are totally the cool kids. And yeah, tell me I'm wrong. You just can't. We are the cool kids. with fanny packs, if there is such a thing as cool kids with fanny packs. I don't know. Um, Anyways, let's see. Back to my notes. And again, you know me, I do have notes. And boy, do I have a lot, because we're going to talk about the Brothers Grimm today. I got 7 pages of notes if you count my introduction. So a lot of notes, a lot of things to tell you about. I was very excited to research about the Brothers Grimm. I am kind of a literature geek. I am not a literature expert, but I am a literature geek. Always have been, always was. And this just really kind of fell into that slot for me. I do hope you enjoy it. This one's going to be a little bit kind of on the academic side, academics according to gals. This is all my stuff. You know that. I am my own research assistant. So any errors in research are mine and mine alone. On that note, oh, thank you, Sybil. Sybil likes my shirt. Never better. Yeah, on that note, I'm not going to tell you what my sources are. If you hear something interesting, look it up for yourself. You all got a Google finger. Don't take my word for it. Look it up for yourself. I always say this: Wikipedia is never a good source, but Wikipedia is always a good place to start if you ever want to do any research on your own for a project. Wikipedia is a great place to get an outline, and sometimes Wikipedia has really good links too. So I do say that Wikipedia is not a good source, but it's always a good place to start when you want to look something up. Let's see, you know where I am. You see the banner at the bottom. We are live from Lizzie Lou's studio. I am the Lou in Lizzie Lou. I'm going to take that off for now. Rochelle, if you are watching, good morning. And Michelle is the Lizzie in Lizzie Lou. So I am here because of Michelle. Lizzie Lou Studio is totally my comfort zone. And I do want to say this. The people who do watch, if you do watch, I want you all to know that I do take this very seriously. I give a lot of thought to what I'm going to wear. I give a lot of thought to my backgrounds. I always, you'll see hair and makeup is done. Try to have my nails done. I try to do my research. I try to test my audio and my video beforehand. If I'm going to do a live stream, it's a whole day event for me and a whole week event for me. I mean, I spent a week researching this, and I could have spent a month researching. I could do just Jennifer's weekly episode on the Grimm brothers. There's so much information about this. But anyways, I feel like I'm starting to ramble. So let me get back to this stuff. Look it all up yourself. Get comfortable. I want to remind folks, this is an 18+ space. You know what I like to say? Sometimes I'm a little disturbed that we're not more disturbed by the disturbing things that we talk about. And this subject is no different. The Grimm brothers, no different. It's quite disturbing, I think. But again, this is an 18+ space. Hey, put your favorite beverage in your coffee cup. Nobody will know what it is. So do whatever you want to do. This is a 420 friendly space. Smoke them if you got them. I know I sure did. Look at my vape pen on the green side is invisible on the green screen. But anyways, the point is get comfortable, kick back, relax, have a smoke, have a coffee, whatever you want, and sit back and listen to a really interesting story. I think we're going to talk about the Brothers Grimm. And why did I pick the Brothers Grimm? Because I don't know, we were talking about holiday stuff and all kinds of weird things. And we were talking about Krampus, and then we were talking about the Easter Bunny, and we talked about Santa Claus, and we talked about the Pied Piper, and we talked about really weird stuff coming out of Germany between the 1600s and the 1800s, and other weird things. What was going on in the world at that time? For some reason, I have a little bit of an obsession about this area. It seems a lot of my research for different stories kind of lead me back to Germany for some reason. But what was going on during that time, as some of you know, we talked about there was a lot of religious turmoil in the world. Henry VIII had split off from the Roman Catholic Church. In Germany, you had predominantly Lutheran and Roman Catholic, but predominantly Christian. And in England, not only were there Catholics, but there were still pagans or Wiccans. And because of religious persecution, the pagans there was a mass migration of Anglo-pagans to the Saxony region of Germany. So now you're mixing paganism with Christianity in a new environment. And I mean, blah, 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 blah. I could draw so many conclusions from this. It's ridiculous. My point is there was some really weird shit going on during that time. It was the Enlightenment. It was the Renaissance. Scientists who, Galileo and all those kind of guys, again, look it up yourself. But scientists who said that we weren't that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe were persecuted and prosecuted and ousted and all that kind of stuff. So there's some really weird stuff going on. There was some Enlightenment stuff. There were new ideas. There were old ideas, and they were clashing. And this area of Germany was just kind of ripe for this, So, anyways, this kind of leads us to the Brothers Grimm. Also, Salem witch trials were going on during that time. All over the world, there was some weird stuff going on. Things were changing. So anyways, Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm, they were born respectively in 1785 and 1786, what we would call in Boston Irish twins, born less than a year apart. So they grew up very close. They did grow up in a family of 9. I'm not going to give you their whole life story. I really want to talk about the stories that they procured, but I will tell you a little bit about their background. Again, they were in a family of 9 kids, and they were fairly well off. Their father was a civil servant, and then he died, and they became very, very poor. And these 2 brothers, Jakob and Wilhelm, had to help take care of the other children. I don't know where they fall in line of other children, but when there's 9 kids, the other kids are taking a lot of responsibility, I feel like. And these 2 brothers grew up particularly close. Like I said, in Boston, we would call them Irish twins. One of the brothers married and one of the brothers didn't. And the brother and his wife that married, the brother that didn't, went and lived with them. So those brothers were just very close. They grew up during a time of political unrest. There was political unrest in Germany. There was a chancellor. His name was August something. I'm not going to get into all that crapola. And I don't mean any offense when I say that, but there was also threat of Napoleon. This was the time of Napoleon, and he was going to invade Germany. Michelle, hello, nice to see you. So there was a lot of unrest going on, and then you had old religions and new religions and all kinds of stuff going on there. So anyways, these brothers, they grew up and they ended up going to university. They specialized in, and they weren't just storytellers. They specialized, they were serious scholars. They specialized in language. They were linguists. They were librarians that specialized in German heritage, literature, and folklore. I think that's kind of makes sense. We know what they're known for, the fairy tales. And also, interesting, they wrote the very first German dictionary. They opposed censorship. So of all the things that I just said about them, notice that I didn't say that they were authors. They didn't write the fairy tales. They procured them. They curated them. They collected them. They refined them. They published them. But they didn't write them. And some of them that were thought to be German folklore of that area at the time, turns out some of these stories are very, very old. So anyways, and you'll hear more about that, like the story of Cinderella goes back way back before this time period. Anyways, they did oppose censorship. And the brothers originally wanted to study law, but eventually they did change to literature. They basically became a rags to riches story because, like I said, when their dad died, their family was broke, and these guys doing what they did and writing the dictionary and procuring and publishing these stories ended up making a lot of money from this. Well deserved. So they really worked hard at this. And they lived, like I said, during a time of political turmoil. Whoops, I just hit my table, sorry. During a time of political turmoil, and they were considered rebels. During that time, the chancellor of Germany had ripped up the country's constitution and had tried to make all civil servants, of which they were professors at that time, make them sign documents that they were loyal to him, and they wouldn't do it, and they lost their jobs, and they got their jobs back eventually. So yeah, they were considered rebels. They were very, very politically active. I don't know the exact details. I don't know who's right, who's wrong, and who's what. So that's not my goal here. Sorry, making a little adjustment. Oh, hi, Kathy Marandino, and hi, Shannon. Nice to see you. So I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of context about what was going on at that time. A lot of political unrest, and these guys, they were considered rebels, and they opposed censorship. I mean, that's got to be something good. We all know that. And their goal in gathering these stories was to try to unite the country during a time where the country was their own chancellor was dividing them, and there was threat of French Napoleonic occupation. So I am painting this with a very broad brush. Look it up yourself, and get years and dates and all that kind of stuff. But again, I'm just trying to give you a little bit of context of what was going on when the Brothers Grimm procured and curated these stories that we grew up with, and a couple of them that I personally had never heard of. So I think we're going to hear about that. A couple of them that I don't think you had ever heard of either. Anyways, let's see. They had a friend who was an author, and his name was Clemens Brentano. And in 1808, he asked the Brothers Grimm. He's the one who asked them to collect folk tales for use in Brentano's own book. He asked the Brothers Grimm, hey, get these stories together. I want to put them in a book. So they got them together. They actually sent him 53 stories in, I think it was in 1810. But they did keep a copy of the manuscript that they sent to him. They sent it to him, and he never used it. And he lost the original manuscript. And it was funny, the original manuscript turned up in 1920, so over 100 years later, the original manuscript. Thank goodness that the Brothers Grimm kept a copy of it, so that they could publish it when they realized that their friend wasn't going to use them. But thank goodness that this Italian author, I think Italian Clemens Brentano, that he did ask them to do this, to get these stories together, because that's really what started it. So a different friend encouraged them to publish them in 1812. And again, their motivation was really kind of to preserve German folklore and to bring community together. But what you'll find is that these stories, they were trying to bring German folks together, but these stories really have a generational and international appeal. International appeal because some of them, well, again, they thought they were German origin, go way, way back, like Cinderella. And again, I'm going to talk about that in a second. These books were originally geared towards adults. These were not children's fairy tales. They were geared towards adults. They were considered educational manuals. So the original stories published. Oh, I don't speak German. Where's Kent Wusterbarth when I meet him? Kinder und Hausmärchen. It's short. It KHM, and it stood for Children's and Household Tales, but it was geared to adults. Okay. These stories emphasize morality, they emphasize good over evil, they emphasize that perseverance over adversity or during adversity is rewarded, evil is punished, and that justice is harsh. So they had some Oh, hi everybody. Are people still there? Sorry about that. Let me know if you can still see and hear me. I am on plan B. I've got my cell phone going. Again, I do apologize about that. My internet went down, and that's kind of one of the issues with live streaming is that you do have to kind of go with the flow, and that's where I kind of consider myself I guess sort of a pro because I go with the flow here. So I am going to try to move my seat because that ain't comfortable there with my cell phone. And look at that. You can see my green screen behind me. But I'm going to try to move over here. Ouch. And if you're interested, I'm happy to continue. And again, I do apologize. For the interruption. So, anyways, back to what I was saying. I'm going to jump right back in it. We were talking about the Brothers Grimm publishing their stories of German folk tales, children's and household tales, which really were geared towards adults, and they were considered educational manuals, which I thought was interesting. They weren't considered like pleasure reading or that kind of thing. Um, there were very early versions of Cinderella, Snow White, Rapunzel, Hansel and Gretel, and these ain't your Disney versions. These ain't your Disney versions. Good, Carrie. Thanks for letting me know you can hear and see me. I am going to actually bounce back over to my computer and see if my internet is up, and it is not. And I don't know what the heck happened. And I'm going to turn another light on. Anyways, so some of the most violent stories that they published, let's see, the Juniper Tree, the Robber Bridegroom, the Girl Without Hands, Cinderella, Snow White, the Frog Prince. Some of these stories we know, and some of them I had never heard of. But you're going to find that these first versions were really very violent and dark and gruesome. They were definitely later revised drastically for kids. They were homogenized for Disney and so on and so on and so forth. They were really really cleaned up. But we're going to take a look at three of these stories. And remember what I said, these stories really they emphasize morality, they stress good over evil, perseverance over adversity is rewarded, evil is punished, and justice is very harsh. Uh, Keep those things in mind. And now we're going to look at some of these stories. And I'm on page 4 of my notes. And again, thank you guys so much for rolling with the punches with me here, for me just having to change gears and switch around. So there's 3 elements to Grimm fairy tales. The first element is you're always going to find an element of magic or supernatural happening in a Grimm fairy tale. The second element in a Grimm fairy tale is archetypal characters, very well defined good and evil characters. And you go, yeah, well, that's easy enough. Well, is it really? I thought about that. In Grimm fairy tales, you know who the bad guy is, you know who the good guy is, right off the bat. But I thought, I want to think of some examples that we don't know exactly who the good guy is. And let's see, I'm looking at my notes. How about in the Harry Potter stories? We don't always know who the good guy is. I mean, come on, we thought Snape was a bad guy, and he wasn't. And we did. Yeah, there we go, back again. So, and in how about that TV show Damages? You never know. Is what's her name? Glenn Close. Is she the good guy or the bad guy? So, but in the Grimm fairy tales, you always know who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Um, is anybody watching DTF St. Louis? It's an excellent program. I highly recommend it on HBO. I think it is. It's excellent. But there's no, you don't know who the good guy and the bad guy is. I'm 6 episodes in, and every time I think I've got this thing figured out, there is a curveball thrown. You just don't know. In Grimm fairy tales, you are going to know who the bad guy and the good guy is and are. And the last thing is there's always the rule of 3. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. So there's 3 elements to Grimm fairy tales, and the third element being there's a rule of 3. Um, And some examples of the rule of three, and you're going to hear about this in the three stories that I selected to tell you about. Carrie's watching DTF. Yeah, it is pretty good. But the rule of three, there's tell me if this show, tell me if DTF doesn't fall into this. I'm reading that book, Altionum Spiritus, from Brad, and his book fits these stories of three. I mean his this rule of three. But anyways, we're going to see examples. The characters are tested three times with three different things, or the heroes might come in three, or there might be three siblings, or there might be 3 nights of trials and tribulations. A series of three creates rhythm, it creates suspense, and it creates a satisfying structure. And I just gave you a very rhythmic statement that created suspense by saying rhythm and suspense, because you knew there was going to be a third thing, and I just gave you a satisfying structure. It creates rhythm, suspense, and a satisfying structure. I just used the rule of three there. But and it creates suspense because you know that third thing is coming. The other thing is, for something to be a pattern, for humans to recognize something as a pattern, it has to happen 3 times. So that's interesting. Twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. It's as far as human recognition goes. So those are the three elements to Grimm fairy tales. Magic or supernatural elements, archetypal characters. You know who the good guy is, you know who the bad guy is. They're very defined, very well defined right off the bat, and you'll find a rule of three throughout the stories. Um, the morals, really, like I said, good triumphs over evil, bad is punished, perseverance and hard work are rewarded. So it's all stories, the basic premise of good versus evil, conflict, two opposing forces brought together in a narration, causing a struggle, which is usually resolved. That's the basis of any story, right? But yeah, so Grimm's got the 3 elements there. So I'm going to talk about first about their story called The Juniper Tree. I had never heard this story, so I don't know all the details of it. I'm painting this story with a very broad brush, as the expression goes. But basically, there was a stepmother who was jealous of her stepson. I guess the mother and her daughter moved in with the father and his son, and the stepmother was very jealous. She decapitates him. These stories are very, very violent. Again, they were to be told to adults, not to children. So she does that, and she ends up feeding that to the father, and the father eats the head of the son. The son is reincarnated as a bird. And this bird returns to receive and give gifts. So the bird sings a song, which is the reincarnated son, to a goldsmith, and he receives a gold chain. He sings a song to a shoemaker, and he's gifted with a pair of leather shoes. And he sings a song to a miller, and he's gifted with a millstone. So the reincarnated bird um, gifts the gold chain to his father, gifts the red leather shoes to his sister, and the millstone. The bird, who's the reincarnated son that the stepmother killed, is singing outside in the juniper tree, and singing so much so that the stepmother is being driven crazy. So she runs out the door to see what is this bird that's driving her crazy. And the third gift drops the millstone. The bird drops the millstone on her head, and she dies. Not only does she get killed, but she goes up in flaming smoke and all that kind of shit. Um, so it's a really interesting story. And then the rest of the family, the father, the sister, and the brother live happily ever after. And again, I had never heard that story, the juniper tree, but right off the bat, I like that one. I mean, I did pick it first because it is the most violent, which is what I'm trying to demonstrate here. But it's so easy to identify those 3 elements that I first said that the Grimm brothers had in their stories. Magic, there's the reincarnation of the boy as a bird. There's the stepmother when he drops the millstone, she disappears in smoke and fire. There's archetypal, you know the mother's bad right away, the stepmother, because she kills the kid, and you know that the kid is good. And there's 3 family members, there's 3 gifts, there's your rule of 3. So that, in a nutshell, is the most violent story of the Grimm brothers. My Lynn just texted me. Oh my God, are you talking about this, Linny? So is that crazy? Who freaking knew? You know me, Facta Obscura. Stick with me. Stick with me, and I'm going to tell you what you didn't know. I want to see if my internet is up yet, because I would really prefer to be back at my computer with this, if you don't mind. Maybe Lenny is saying, oh my God, what's behind you? You're hang on, guys. I'm jumping in. I'm going to go off for a second, and I'm going to jump in. And I'm back. Sorry about that little kerfuffle. Like I said, one of the things I kind of pride myself in live streaming is you really have to go with the changes. When plan A fails, you have to expect it to. You have to be ready with plan B. And when plan B sitting over there in the chair didn't make me happy, I had to go to plan C and check that my internet is back up. And here I am. So anyways, jumping right back into it. Jennifer's, Grimm Brothers 101. Y'all gonna get a certificate after this. Pay attention, because there may be a quiz. Seriously, we've just talked about the juniper tree, which was the most violent of the Grimm brothers stories, and I told you it's got all three of those elements. The next story, which was another one I had never heard of, was called The Robber Bridegroom. Never heard this one before. So the miller's daughter becomes engaged to this man, and she immediately dislikes him and distrusts him. This is a story about going with your gut. She does not like him. She has immediate unease. This is an arranged marriage, you know. Somehow she is led to a cabin in the forest on 3 different occasions, and she receives 3 warnings from a magic bird. It's different stories. Some say a magic bird, some say a hag, some say, so anyway, she receives 3 warnings on 3 different occasions, but she is drawn into the woods, and she eventually, I think on the 3rd time, she sees these men in this cabin with a young woman, and they rob her, and they kill her, and so the girl is hiding in the house, and somehow they cut the girl's finger off to take a gold ring, and the finger goes flying, and the girl who's hiding ends up with the finger, and anyways, yeah, weird story. I never ever had heard this one before, and and this lady gets it, and she leaves, and she doesn't know who did this crime, but she knows she's got this gold ring. So anyways, at her wedding to this guy that she's just so leery of, she presents this story that she had a dream that she saw this happen, and then she presents the finger and the gold ring, and somehow the husband and his band of men, who are probably his groomsmen, are exposed, and they're executed. They're punished and they're executed, I think, right then and there at the wedding. So again, very, very violent. The Robber Bridegroom. Had anybody out there ever heard of that one? I don't know. But so we've got our Grimm. Y'all took notes. We've got our Grimm checklist of 3 things. We've got magic. A bird gives 3 magical warnings. Archetypal, we know that the bride is good. We know that the groom is bad right off the bat, because this lady knows it, she feels it, she senses it. And the rule of 3, she visits the house on 3 different occasions. On each time she has a different hiding place, and she receives 3 warnings from the bird in the woods. So there's really a consistency here, as you will see, because in the 3rd one, I'm going to give you a pattern. So 2 coincidences. Here's our 3rd one, our pattern of Grimm fairy tales being very, very violent and not geared towards children, and containing these 3 very simple elements, very, very simple elements: magic, archetypal, very defined good and bad characters, and the rule of 3. And I think we're really kind of rolling with the rule of 3 here as we go along. So the third story that I want to present to you as being one of the top most violent of the Grimm fairy tales is Cinderella, one of our favorites. And you know what? You see, I got this goofy little thing in my hair. I always wear this because my hair is so dark, and I want you to see the different. It helps the view. You know what I mean? I told you I always try to look and make sure everything is good here. But these remind me of Cinderella and the way she wears her hair. So I really like them for that reason too. But this ain't that Cinderella. This ain't the Disney Cinderella of the birds singing and helping her fold clothes uh and the fairy godmother. There's no fairy godmother in the original Cinderella story. Um, so I told you initially the Grimm brothers were trying to gather these stories together to bring together like the German folk. Well, this is an example that it was very easy to find that the story of Cinderella is not of a German folk origin. The story of Cinderella goes back to Egyptian times. There's a similar story of a woman who is not treated well and loses a shoe and is marries into royalty because the shoe is found. And there's also one that goes further back than ancient Egypt that goes back to ancient Chinese civilizations. And so in the Egyptian story, it was a shoe of red leather, and in ancient China, it was a shoe of gold. And there's one thing that these three shoes all have in common, whether it's a shoe of gold, a red shoe of leather during an Egyptian time period, or a shoe of glass. Because you always think with the story of Cinderella, well, anybody could have a size 8 shoe. Reverend Mark is in the house. Anybody could have a size 8 shoe. How come only Cinderella fit this shoe? Well, if the shoe is glass, it was made just for her foot, or it would have fallen off. In the Egyptian time, a leather shoe would have been custom made, not like us going to Payless at Easter and picking out sandals. A leather shoe would have been custom made for a certain foot. In ancient China, a gold shoe would have been custom made for one person's foot. So that's kind of the relevance, the significance of this story being a shoe throughout, and how that identifies who Cinderella is. But anyways, so let's talk about Cinderella as our third Grimm fairy tale and being one of the most violent. So there is a young woman, you never really know her real name, and her mother on her deathbed tells this young woman, oh, honey, you have to be good. I'm going to die and I'm going to pass away and you have to be good. And the girl plants a hazel tree in memory of her mom. Oh, got to get my coffee. Hang on. Thank you. So she plants a hazel tree in memory of her mother, and the hazel tree grows into a magical tree. And this tree is magical because it grants wishes. So, anyways, the father remarries a cruel woman with two very jealous daughters. And so this young girl who lost her mother and is now has a stepmother and two stepsisters, she's forced into servitude. I don't really know what happens to the father. I don't really know. I'm sure if I looked further, I could find out. But so she's forced to sweep and clean and cook, and she sleeps amongst the ashes. Some stories have her sleeping in the attic. But the point is, she does not have a nice bed and a warm place to sleep like the rest of the people in the house, or a clean place to sleep like the rest of the people in the house. And she does the bulk of the housework. And that's the name, Cinderella, sleeping in the ashes. In the original version, there is no fairy godmother. It's the tree. It's the tree that grants these wishes for Cinderella. And the ball, we know Cinderella going to the ball. Well, in the Grimm fairy tales, there were 3 nights. It was a 3-night festival, and she went each night. They all went each night. And also, the tree originally gave her 36 dresses. She had 36 dresses to wear over 3 nights. Oh, the decisions that she had to make about that. But 36 dresses. And then in the original stories, what happens is when the prince or the royalty person shows up to find out who fit this shoe, Back in the ancient Chinese and the ancient Egyptian stories, it's similar. They tell of the stepsisters. I have the vision of the Disney version where they're trying to squeeze their foot into that shoe, right? But in the original versions, much more violent. We are talking about Grimm fairy tales here. One sister cuts her heel off to fit into that shoe, and another sister cuts her toe off to fit into that shoe. And a bird from the magic tree, from the magic hazel tree, alerts the prince to this, and the prince sees the blood, and he realizes that the other two sisters are full of you know what and aren't the right person, and then Cinderella ends up with the shoe. Um, so that is the basis of Cinderella. So I just think that's interesting. It shows. Let's see, how do we get our rule of three? Oh, and also, and the sisters are punished for their wickedness by the doves from the trees peck out their eyes. So again, just such real violence, mutilating their feet to get a husband. And we know that that happened in ancient China, that women mutilated their feet. Hey, my mother always said, you got to suffer to be beautiful. And as I get older, I know exactly what she means. But anyways, the sisters were punished for their wickedness. So Cinderella, let's look at the Grimm rules of three. Magic. The tree, the hazel tree that granted wishes, the dove that pecked the eyes out of the sisters, the 36 dresses, granting of the wishes, Cinderella going to the ball and nobody knowing who she was. There's so much magic in this story. It's crazy. Archetypal characters. Sue knows this old version. Yeah, pretty freaking creepy. Definitely not the homogenized version that so many of us grew up on. But again, the archetypal characters, we know right away that the stepmother is bad. We know right away that the stepsisters are bad. We know right away that Cinderella is good. We knew right away that Cinderella's mother was good. And then we have the rule of three. There's now three siblings, two stepsisters and a sister. There were 3 days at the festival. There were 3 tries for the shoes in their house. So I think that I did a really damn good job of telling you guys about the Brothers Grimm and what the hell, what was going on. They put together this collection. They curated. They didn't write these stories. They curated these folk stories that some of them they thought originated from Germany. Many of them did not. Many of them are much older than that. They curated them, thank goodness, because they did turn into some beloved stories. But they all have, I think I'm really kind of stunned by how violent they are, but they all have really, really harsh, I guess, tale of control. You know, bad people are punished, good people will be rewarded. I definitely see that story. And Shannon, yeah, Disney really is dark. You have to look. And I'm gonna say some Disney movie. We all know, you know, Rapunzel and Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and all those. And what was Rapunzel? You know, Twisted. I think that was the one. But anyways, if you look at the original origins of the story, the Disney versions are actually very far from them. And the original stories really are very dark. Auntie Kathy, hi. I didn't swear once during this whole live stream in case Auntie Kathy tuned in, and there she is. So I'm very proud of myself. But while Aunt Kathy is here, I also want to mention that as a kid, I remember that my father had a series of books. Kathy, do you remember these books? They were very quality books. They were not encyclopedias, but they were stories of gremlins and characters from the moon that came down and ate bad children, and there were wonderful illustrations. And I wish we still had these books. They probably be worth some money, but I'd love to read them too. But the pages were almost made of silk, and they were just wonderful stories of goblins and gremlins and what happens to bad children and to bad people. But anyways, those are the messages that were taken away from the Brothers Grimm. You better be good or something really, really bad's going to happen to you, according to them. But we are very grateful to the Brothers Grimm that they curated these stories and put them together. It's like I said, they were fun stories to grow up to, even if we did have homogenized versions. And they're very fun stories to read now as an adult with a different spin on things. So, Also, like I said, if you guys are reading, this is holding my microphone right now, but if you guys are anybody's reading this, I'm about halfway through it and I absolutely love it. Brad's book, all those things that I just told you about, that kind of the Grimm brothers required of their fairy tales, you are going to find that in this book. There is magic. There are archetypal characters. You know who the bad people are right away. You know who the good people are right away. Um, and there's just so many other things that fit the bill. So I think Brad's written a really cool modern day fairy tale. So if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend. Thank you, Aunt Kathy. I'm sorry. Kathy's sorry that she didn't know the name of that series, but those books that my dad had were very interesting, and maybe they were some sort of like grim fairy tale type things. But anyways, and yeah, so happy for Brad. His book is doing great. And Shannon, if you have a chance to read it, I highly recommend. It's a great book, very suspenseful, easy to follow the plot, very well written, very really, really good story, very, very unique and interesting story. So again, all right, guys, thanks for joining me on Sunday morning coffee hour. I want to thank you all who stuck around while I had to roll with some changes when my internet went down. Thank you all for sticking with me while I presented Gal's version of what the hell with the Brothers Grimm. I hope you found some of it as interesting as I did, but definitely left me walking away, scratching my head, going, "What were these guys thinking?" Some crazy shit. So, yeah, see, Shannon, plan on it. I plan on seeing all of you soon here on Gals and all of you in person. I'm going to be seeing Aunt Kathy and Michelle shortly and hope to see all of you around. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you really enjoyed this presentation on the Brothers Grimm, Jennifer's book report on the Brothers Grimm. I really enjoyed putting it together and really enjoyed presenting it. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Take care. I will see you all, I'm pretty sure next week, Saturday at 5:30, but I will post it during the week. Thank you all again for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. Take it easy. Bye-bye.